The movie opens with a teenager named Chris, who has just transferred to a new high school. While wandering the halls looking for the principal's office, he meets a friendly girl named Tanya. She offers to show him the way, but before they get there, the principal steps in and sends Tanya back to class. Inside the office, the principal brings up the incident that got Chris transferred from his previous school. Chris quickly shuts the conversation down, saying the past is behind him and asking him not to dig up old memories. That same evening, Chris joins Tanya, her ex-boyfriend Zach, and Zach's brother Brett at the local carnival. After spending some time enjoying the rides, the group sits down to hang out. During the conversation, Brett raises a toast to someone named Laura, leaving Chris confused about who she is. Tanya explains that Laura was her younger sister. Years ago, Laura was dropped off at Edith Cranston's daycare, and after that, she vanished without a trace. No one ever saw her again. Zach says they have no proof to make Edith confess, but they can still make her life miserable. So the group heads straight to the old woman's house. On the way, Brett tells Chris that everyone in town believes Edith is a witch. When they reach the house, the others start vandalizing it, smashing windows and even throwing a dead animal inside. Chris refuses to join in, feeling the whole thing has gone too far. Just as they're about to leave, Edith suddenly steps outside and blocks their path. She warns them that she will never abandon her home. Then she coldly tells them that no matter how much they hate her, she hates them even more. Tanya fires back, saying they won't stop until Edith either leaves town or dies. Edith isn't shaken at all. Instead, she stares directly at Tanya and tells her that, while she fears nothing, Tanya should be terrified. She even asks where Tanya got the necklace she's wearing. Tanya angrily tells her they'll meet in hell. Without missing a beat, Edith calmly replies, "Yes, we will." She orders them off her property, and the group finally drives away. Back inside the house, Edith sits with her husband Edward. Completely broken, she admits that she's trying to remember the happy moments of her life, her adventures, dreams, and the children she once cared for. But every good memory has faded away. All that's left inside her is darkness. Edward gently comforts her, reminding her that his greatest dream was to stay by her side forever, and he kept that promise. But Edith silently walks away. A few moments later, she's seen holding a doll while staring at an old photograph of a little girl. Then, in a shocking moment, Edith takes her own life by hanging herself. The following morning, Chris's mother notices that something is seriously bothering him and asks if he's okay. Still shaken by the news of Edith's death, Chris avoids the conversation. A few days later, Tanya, Zach, and Brett confront him, wondering why he hasn't been coming to school. Chris finally admits what's been haunting him. They were all at Edith's house on the very night she died. What if their actions pushed her over the edge? Zach immediately dismisses the idea, insisting they didn't kill her and warning Chris to keep his mouth shut. Chris refuses to be intimidated, telling Zach he's not afraid of him. Trying to stop the argument, Tanya pulls Chris aside. She reminds him that Edith is gone now, and no matter what happened, nothing can change the past. As they spend more time together, it's clear that Tanya and Chris are growing closer. But Zach doesn't like what he's seeing, and even Brett begins to sense that something is about to go terribly wrong. Later that night, Edward picks up the phone and calls Chris. Not long after, the entire group shows up at the Cranston house, completely confused. Tanya asks why they have been brought there, but Edward simply tells everyone to follow him inside. Looking at Chris, Edward says he must be the new guy, but that doesn't really matter. He then reminds the group that they're probably grieving now because they have no idea whose house they'll terrorize next. Tanya demands to know what he wants. Edward coldly replies that if he had gotten what he truly wanted, this meeting would have been much less peaceful. He explains that Edith was a different kind of person, someone who always knew how to forgive. In fact, she shocked everyone by leaving Tanya a part of her inheritance. Tanya immediately says she doesn't want anything that belonged to Edith, but then Edward reveals the amount, $100,000. That gets everyone's attention. Suspicious, Tanya asks what the catch is. Edward smiles and says Edith loved playing games. Then he asks if any of them believe in ghosts or are afraid of the supernatural. The group laughs it off and says no. Edward then gives them a chilling challenge. Upstairs at the end of the hallway, there's an old office with a telephone inside. Each of them must go into the room one at a time. Next to the phone is a number. They have to dial it, stay on the line for exactly 1 minute, and if they succeed, the money will be theirs. Chris asks the obvious question. Who are they supposed to call? Edward's answer sends chills through the room. They're calling Edith. He reveals that Edith was buried with a phone inside her coffin. All they have to do is stay on the line for 1 minute, leave through the back door afterward, and by morning, they'll receive the money. Chris then asks what happens if someone hangs up before the minute is over. Edward explains that anyone who quits loses their share, and that money will be split among the people who stay on the call. Tanya refuses, insisting she doesn't need the money, but Zach is eager to play. As Tanya turns to leave, Edward drops a bombshell. He reveals that Edith's death wasn't an accident, it was suicide. Shocked, Tanya asks what that has to do with them. Edward says Edith's suicide note clearly states that the years of harassment and threats from their group had become too much for her to bear. Now, all he wants is for them to fulfill his late wife's final wish. Otherwise, he'll hand that suicide note over to the police. With no other choice, the group quietly discusses it among themselves. When Edward returns, Tanya reluctantly agrees. Before leaving, Edward gives them one final warning. Every time someone finishes their call, the old grandfather clocks upstairs will chime. Only then can the next person enter the room. He decides the order. Zach goes first, Brett second, Chris third, and Tanya will be the last. Then Edward walks out, locking the door behind him. Zach nervously heads upstairs and dials the number. At that exact moment, deep inside the cemetery, a phone begins ringing. From inside Edith's grave. A pale hand slowly reaches out and answers the call. Edith's voice whispers, "I'm so glad you called." Then she calmly tells Zach to look into the mirror. As he raises his eyes, his blood freezes. Standing silently behind him is Edith. Terrified, Zach stammers, asking what is happening. With a chilling smile, Edith softly replies, "You're in my world now." Zach hangs up the phone and tries to leave, but for some reason, he can't even get out of the chair. As he opens the door, he's suddenly transported back to his childhood. He sees himself and Brett as little kids, and young Zach quickly tells his brother to hide under the bed. A few seconds later, their drunk father storms into the room and brutally whips Zach with a belt. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the vision disappeared. Moments later, Zach hears Brett calling his name from outside. He follows the voice into the hallway, where he finds one of his old childhood toys lying on the floor. But before he can react, something dark rushes past him. A terrifying growl echoes through the house, and the ghost of his abusive father suddenly appears, shoving him back into the room. His father tells him he'll never escape because no matter where he runs, he'll always find him. Then he starts beating Zach again, screaming that he's ashamed to call him his son. But before finishing him off, he offers Zach one final chance to fight back. Through tears, Zach says he can't do it. He just wants to go home. His father ignores his pleas and wraps the belt around his neck, slowly choking him. At the same time, we cut back to Edith, who quietly hung up the phone. Outside, Brett waits nervously for his turn. When the old clock strikes and the front door slowly creaks open, he walks inside, convincing himself that if Zach survived, then he can too. He dials the mysterious number and says he's calling about the money he's owed. Edith calmly replies that he's reached the right place. Brett assumes she's still alive and that this entire nightmare is just some twisted prank. But Edith asks him a chilling question. "How's your father doing?" She says she knows exactly what kind of monster he was. Brett angrily tells her to shut up, but Edith keeps talking. She reveals that after Brett's mother died, his father turned his life into a living nightmare, inflicting unimaginable abuse on him. Then she reminds him of the creepy nursery rhyme he used to repeat as a child, the one about the monster hiding under the bed. She tells Brett that all he has to do is stay on the line and check if something is hiding underneath. As soon as she says that, Brett is pulled into the same horrifying vision. He's back under the bed, helplessly watching his father savagely beat young Zach. Then the vision suddenly vanishes. Brett slowly crawls out from under the bed, but instead of finding himself back in the room, he somehow ends up at the same abandoned carnival. One of the attractions suddenly jumps out and startles him. Panicked, Brett runs as fast as he can, only to come face to face with the ghosts of Zach and their father. Desperate to escape, he rushes into another room and collapses onto a bed. Suddenly, his father's ghost appears in the mirror, warning him that the monster is coming for him. Terrified, Brett stands up and notices a message written on the bed, telling him to look behind you. The moment he turns around, a horrifying creature bursts out from under the bed, grabs him, and drags him into the darkness below. As the grandfather clock chimes once again, the front door slowly opens for the next victim. The only ones left are Chris and Tanya. Then they realize something strange. They never heard the back door open. It's Chris's turn. He picks up the phone and dials the number. On the other end, Edith calmly asks him how he's managed to live with so many secrets and so much guilt. Suddenly, he's pulled into a terrifying vision. Chris is reunited with his girlfriend, Sarah, and we learn that she was pregnant with his child. Sarah wants to tell her parents about the baby, but Chris begs her to wait until the semester is over. She refuses and decides to tell them anyway before leaving. Later that night, while driving home, Chris comes across Sarah's wrecked car. Inside, he finds her lifeless body. In an instant, he's back inside the haunted hallway, where Sarah's ghost slowly walks toward him. Chris panics and tries to run, but he trips and falls. When he looks up again, Sarah no longer looks like a ghost. She appears exactly as she did when she was alive. She gently asks him to come closer and take her hand. Chris does, and Sarah quietly tells him they don't have much time. Fighting back tears, he admits how much he's missed her. Sarah then gives him one final clue. She tells him that the path he used to get here is also the only way out. She tells Chris to find the phone, and he immediately starts searching for it. Just as he reaches the receiver, Brett suddenly grabs his arm and demands to know what's going on. Chris desperately explains that the phone is their only escape, but instead of helping, Brett bursts into insane laughter. Despite the chaos, Chris manages to grab the receiver and escapes the vision. The door opens, and now it's Tanya's turn. Chris rushes after her to stop her, but suddenly he hears piano music. He finds Edith sitting at the piano. However, when he pulls back the cover, no one is there. A second later, Edith appears sitting in a chair behind him, scaring him before vanishing once again. Meanwhile, Tanya watches an old video playing on a television. In the recording, Chris is talking to Edith. He tells her they've completed every part of their agreement, even her death. Edith smiles and replies that 2 people are already ready. Only one remains. She wants Chris to take care of Tanya, and in return, he'll receive all the money she promised. The video ends, and Tanya comes face to face with Chris. She immediately points a gun at him, convinced he has been working with Edith all along. Chris begs her to lower the weapon. He insists Edith is already dead, the game was never real, and every phone call has been nothing more than a trap. He also reveals that both Brett and Zach are already dead. At that moment, Edward suddenly appears. He says they took away the only person he truly loved, but they've found a way to stay connected forever. Right then, the phone rings. Edward answers it and starts talking to Edith as if she's standing right beside him. Then he tells Tanya that Edith wants to speak with her. Before anything else can happen, Chris pulls the trigger. Edward collapses to the floor, dead. Chris and Tanya immediately run for the front door, hoping to escape. But when they reach it, they discover it's been completely boarded shut. Chris remembers another exit through the office, so they sprint back toward it. Tanya reaches the phone room first, with Chris right behind her. The moment she steps inside, the door slams shut. The phone begins ringing. With trembling hands, Tanya answers it. Instantly, Edith drags her into another horrifying vision. Tanya finds herself back at the daycare where she once worked. There, she sees her younger sister, Laura. Since it's Laura's birthday, Edith gives her a beautiful necklace. Then the horrifying truth is revealed. Tanya murdered her own sister. She couldn't stand that Laura was always their father's favorite child. Overcome with jealousy, Tanya killed her and took the necklace for herself. Terrified, Tanya hangs up the phone and tries to escape. But Edith blocks her path. She says that the moment she saw Tanya wearing Laura's necklace, she immediately knew Laura was dead, and exactly who had killed her. When everyone blamed Edith for Laura's disappearance, something inside her completely broke. That's when the darkness consumed her. Tanya begs for mercy, but Edith coldly tells her that a special place in hell has been waiting just for her. Then Edith reveals what hell really is. It's not flames or burning sulfur like the Bible describes. Hell is being trapped inside your worst nightmare. Forever. A moment later, Laura's ghost appears. She innocently asks Tanya if she wants to play, then suddenly attacks her. Right then, the door bursts open and Chris rushes inside. He grabs the phone and demands to know what Edith really wants. In an instant, Chris finds himself standing face to face with Edith. She calmly tells him she wants revenge for herself and for her husband. Then she smiles and says, "Now you're in my world." Suddenly, Chris is back in the endless hallway. Sarah's ghost appears one last time and asks him a heartbreaking question. "Why did you leave me?" Before Chris can answer, she lets out a blood-curdling scream. In the end, Chris becomes trapped forever inside Edith's twisted world, along with Tanya, Zach, and his brother Brett. And that's where this terrifying story comes to an end.